Okay, this meeting is being broadcast. Welcome to Budget and Financial Strategy. Over to the chairman, Councillor Rawlinson.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody is well.
Yes.
Right. Okay, let's get straight on then. Apologies for absence and substitutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've not been notified of any apologies.
Fine. Okay, thank you. Minutes of the last meeting have been circulated. Any comments on those? Then is it your wish that I sign them?
Agreed.
Happy with that? Thank you. Chairman's announcements, none. Urgent business, none. So we move on to the main item of the agenda, the finance monitoring report for October.
Mr. Chairman, we need to ask if anyone has any interest to declare.
Thank you very much. I missed that one out entirely.
No problem.
Any declarations of interest? None? No? Okay, thank you. Right, we will now move on to item 6, the finance monitoring report, and I'll hand over to Denise.
Thank you very much, Chair. If I can just take you down to page 7. The budget and financial strategy, the finance monitoring report for October 20. Item 3.3 in the paragraph there was currently forecasting a surplus of £179,000. That's made up of the COVID costs for the different directorates of 2.1 million. The business rates reserves, the money we actually want to move into reserves, of 3.9 million. On the funding side, we then have received grants to date of 1,762,000. But business rates Section 31 grant of 3.8 million and a surplus of 1920 of £530,000. There's also then other underspends of £111,000, bringing us down to that surplus of 179,000. The detail of that is actually on page 49 onwards in all the tables. I'm happy to take any questions relating to those or any of the variances that we do have on that report.
Right. Are there any questions? Yes, Councillor Billingham.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 8, I'm not sure that this is actually relevant to this committee, but it's the only opportunity I have to ask the question. But in paragraph 3.5, we talk about disabled facilities grants. Bullet point 2, page 8, 3.5. Yeah. I'm not quite understanding what we're saying there about to reduce the budget to the same level as the grant funding for 2021, put the amount carried forward from 2019 to 2020. Are we suggesting that there is going to be a surplus in disabled facilities grants, or are we going to be able to allocate everything we've got before this council ceases to exist, or are we going to be able to ring fence any of that money, which is money that has been paid by South Northamptonshire residents, to ensure that South Northamptonshire residents benefit from it?
There was a proportion of funding. What's happened is when we set the budget back for this year, we've set the budget and we didn't quite know the allocation for the disabled facility grants for the year. And I think off the top of my head, and I can check these figures for you, a figure of about 623,000 was allocated for this year in the capital programme, and it didn't come through as that figure. It's come through as a lower figure. I believe that's 420, and again, I'll check those actual figures for you. And what's happened is it's a difference between those figures. So it's not putting in S&C's extra money, it's just relying on what we get allocated as the disabled facilities grant.
Right, but that is allocated either from our own resources or as grant funding, which is given to South Northamptonshire Council for South Northamptonshire.
Yeah, the £420,000 is the allocation that we're given to South Northampton's grant funding. So it's allocating that money and nothing over and above that at the moment. What we've then got is carried forward from last year as well, and all of that's grant funding coming to us would we spend on disabled facilities grants, whether it's in this year or not. So if it's not spent by the end of this financial year, it stays in that protected area for further funding next year.
But do we have an assurance that it will stay in the protected area of disabled facilities grants for South Northamptonshire, or will it go into disabled facilities grants for West Northamptonshire?
I believe it's for South Northamptonshire because it's a protected fund. It has to be spent on disabled facility grants. That's the allocation that's given to South Northampton.
Yeah, I'm sorry, perhaps I'm being obtuse here, but I'm understanding that it's disabled facilities, therefore it's ring fenced for disabled facilities. What I want us to be sure of is that if it's been granted for disabled facilities for South Northamptonshire, that it needs to continue to be available for disabled facilities for South Northamptonshire, even when we have been subsumed with Daventry and with Northampton Borough into West Northamptonshire.
I believe that's the case because it's actually
their own grant funding.
Sorry, yeah, I believe that's the case because it is actually South Northamptonshire's allocation, because each authority will get its own separate allocation.
Okay.
Yeah. So presumably next year in the unitary, they will get their own allocation of disabled funding grant, which they then have the option to spend anywhere in West Northamptonshire.
Absolutely. But I'm.
But
what I'm concerned about, Chairman, is any residual funds come vesting day that are designated for South Northamptonshire that haven't been allocated should actually be able to be distributed within South Northamptonshire, within the wards that we represent at the moment, and not within the larger unitary, you know, giving some to Daventry and some to Northampton Borough because they've all spent all of their allocation. And if they've got allocation left at that time, I wouldn't expect them to be allowing it to be distributed within South Northamptonshire, because it was given to them as they stood. And that's the only thing I would like, if we can, if Denise can make inquiries and get clarification for us and reassurance, I would be grateful.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. The reason I say it should, and I will do that for you, the reason I say it should be S&C only is because when you see the allocations and you see the criteria that goes up against that funding, it is for the disabled facility grants, it is for S&C. Yeah. So I don't see how that should be changed, but I will seek that clarification for you.
Thank you. Yeah. And the other point I had, Chairman, was that at the bottom of page 15, it says the October complaints report is attached, and my page 16 was blank.
I have a feeling that's probably because we look at the sort of finance side here.
Right.
And it probably got missed out.
Okay.
But this also goes to Cabinet, and Richard wants to say something.
Thank you, through you, Chair. It's broadly the same information that would go to Audit Committee and be circulated to Cabinet. So Audit Committee would have oversight of the complaints report, and I believe that went to the November meeting of Audit Committee. So it has been considered by this council.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I didn't know if I was missing a page. That's all.
Yeah. No, good. Right. Okay. So any other questions on? Ken.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I notice on the business rates that we're actually not up to the required level. What are we doing about ensuring that we actually do collect the appropriate amount of business rates?
Do you want to say anything on that, or would you like me to?
Happy me to take that one. At the moment, they are raising those, so they are raising for arrears to be collected, and they are chasing those up and raising for those to be collected all year. It's been difficult when courts have been closed and businesses have been closed, but now everything's opening up more. That's available to be done and chased up.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think we took a fairly light approach at the beginning of the year because we were going into the first lockdown at that stage. And as Denise has said, we couldn't chase them up then. So you know, it would have been empty threats. But we have now started proactively chasing our debtors, and the amount owing over the course of this year so far is reducing, so it is going in the right direction. And if you look at you know, normal years, we are very often sort of under collecting earlier in the year, and that you know, we pick that up and normally end up pretty high up the table of collections nationally.
And also, what confidence do we have that we get to the end of the year and we're still in a positive situation rather than a negative situation, particularly bearing in mind what you know, with COVID and so on?
Well, I think we've got you know, sufficient reserves there to cope with a fairly wide swing of outcomes. The position at the moment is our sort of most reasonable guess, but obviously things can go a lot better or a lot worse. And I mean, one thing we have had recently is the fees and charges that the government were going to support us on. We applied for all that was appropriate for us, and I think at this stage, I think I'm right, Denise, that everything we've asked for has actually been paid.
Yeah. And the last thing, just for a point of interest, on page 14, we've got income generated through council-owned companies. What companies do we own?
CSN Resources.
Sorry?
CSN Resources.
CSN Resources, okay.
Yeah,
Is that all?
That's our Revs and Bens.
Right, okay. Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Okay, Tony?
Thank you, Chair. On 3.5, we've got a couple of capital surpluses. 2 Whitton's Lane, 23k, and the HR payroll system, 39. It says Whitton's will not be needed. I just wondered where that money was going. And secondly, what is the situation with the payroll? Is that money going to be spent before the end of this council or not?
On the actual capital programme file?
Yes.
So let me just go tab down.
3.5 on your report.
Yeah.
3.5.
On the actual finance monitoring report.
You said 3.5.
So section 3.5 is the...
So the HR payroll system replacement has been spent. That's actually an overspend at this point in time, where they've put the iTrent system in with all its modules. That's happened as an overspend. That's fully spent. I don't believe there's any more spend to come through on that.
Right. So therefore, does the 23 get swallowed up as an underspend into the overspend? Yes.
The 2 Whitton's Lane, there's an underspend on there. The budget's not required. There's no further spend. That would form part of our underspends. And yes, therefore that part of that 39 as well.
Okay, simple answer. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Just one more. With regards to on page 36, obviously we have 2 officers now that have actually taken up their positions in the West Northants Council. Who actually pays their expenses and obviously their salaries and their contributions?
West Northants do pay those. At the moment they go through our salary, but they're fully reimbursed by West Northants, and that's part of that programme.
Oh, it is. Oh, so we actually get the money back?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Oh,
so
I see.
yeah, the overall program costs that we are contributing, I think it's something like 2.4 million to over the course of the whole program. That actually pays for the statutory officers that are in post until the 1st of April, when obviously it will come out of the council tax for West Northants.
Just to clarify that, Chair, so the 3 sovereigns or 3.5 sovereigns are paying money into West Northants.
Yes.
It's actually being funded by the sovereigns.
Yeah. So
we are paying it.
Yeah. All 8 councils are paying into the overall programme. Both in West and North.
So sure, the answer is yes, we are paying it.
We're paying sorry, Chairman, we're paying a proportion of it.
Yes.
Presumably we actually get money from the government for the transition, do we?
No.
We don't? Oh.
No.
Oh. That's a bit of wishful thinking, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it's always worth a try.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Good. Right. I think. Oh, sorry, Rosie. Sorry, you were down the bottom of my screen. Oh, you disappeared.
Sorry. Yeah, that's okay. I did do the raising virtual hands, but never mind. I just wondered whether you could give us some more detail around the excess for leisure, sports and communities. I looked at the appendix and it says that it's to do with loss of fees because they're closed, but they're let to an outside company. So why are we bearing the costs of the loss of in the closures? And also, I realise this is the account for October, but has the cost of the fire been factored in? What does that do to the figures, or is that all covered by insurance? Thank you.
Right, I believe the insurance is covering any fire-related costs for the Coastal Leisure Centre, and I think we took legal advice earlier on, and we were liable for those costs for the leisure centres, but we have had a proportion of that back being reimbursed via government funding. I think I'm right on that, aren't I, Denise?
Yes, what's happened is obviously they've had to close, and part of those closures, either they're getting no funding through that and they're able to furlough some of their employees, but not all, because they have to manage the plant. They can't not manage the plant, otherwise the pool wouldn't be maintained for the period of time. So there is a certain amount of management that has to happen, even if they're closed, through a national lockdown. At the moment, they're able to open because we're in a tier 2 and gyms are opened, but because they're having to operate on a COVID basis, their income is still down. They can't have so much throughput still.
But that's their commercial risk, surely.
Absolutely.
But there is an element of S&C's responsibility of that, and there would be some other income and things that we would otherwise receive, and we're not getting that income. What we are getting is more than we anticipated we would get, and there's an offset between the two. So there is a contractual cost responsibility for S&C, even though it is managed by an outside contractor.
But it's in the realms of 1.25 million.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not my memory of I mean, maybe I was in the early parts of the negotiation of the contract, but it's certainly not my memory and interpretation of the interviews that we gave the commercial companies. I don't know how that has happened, that they are not taking the commercial hit.
They are taking a commercial hit. What we are also getting there is some of the sales fees and charges income. And I can quantify what expenditure or what income we're getting for the sports centres in entirety. There's also another fund that hasn't come through yet. That's a leisure fund that's around 100 million in its total. That's going to be quantified. It wouldn't all be ours, no, by any means, but that's going to be quantified in the next few weeks, where we will see our eligibility for that and how much more we may be able to claw into that fund and see whether we've got any eligibility on that or not. So it's not a fully complete picture just yet.
Okay, I'm glad to hear it. Thank you.
Good. Right. Anything more? Nobody else? Right. Okay. So the last item on the agenda is the committee's work plan. I don't. Yes, Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. We just need the committee's agreement on the resolution to note the report.
Oh, I apologise. I keep on forgetting that. Yeah. Okay. Are we happy to note that report then? Carol and John. Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Right. Yeah. So committee work plan. Obviously, we don't have our standard work plan this year, where we would normally do the final tweaks to the budget in January that Cabinet would recommend to Council in February. But I think we should be able to do a probably the second quarter report. I think that was right, wasn't it, Denise? That we would look at the figures at the end of December next year at our next meeting.
Yes, I was just checking the dates for the next meeting that I was trying to look at. So it's 27th of January.
Yeah. So
Yes.
So the December figures would be available by then, which, as I say, is our second quarter, and then we can have a look at those. So we're trying to keep up with Carol and make sure we're looking at relevant figures.
I think it'll actually be the third quarter, Chairman.
I think you could be right. Well, I mean, we can look at the second quarter again if you like, but yeah, we'll look at the third quarter.
I don't think you get royalties for reruns in this council.
No. Good. Okay. So that is that. So if everybody has had their say,